6 months after the discovery of the ancient fleet, the galaxy was a different place. The human ships had been carefully moved to a place of honor near the coalition capital, where millions of visitors came to see them every day. The names of Captain Morrison, Admiral Blake, and their brave crews were carved into memorial walls on 100 worlds. Dr. Thorne stood in the restored Bridge of the Defiance, now a museum but still functional. She had been promoted to head of the new Human Heritage Project, but she still spent most of her time here, learning from the ancient ship. "The reactor modifications are incredible," she said to Engineer Martinez, who had become her partner in studying the old technology. "They managed to increase power output by 30% just by changing the fuel mixture." Martinez nodded, looking at her tablet. "And the armor plating? They layered different metals to create something stronger than our modern composites. It's like they knew secrets we've forgotten." The real breakthrough had come when human engineers started combining old designs with new technology. The result was ships that were tougher, more reliable, and harder to kill than anything the galaxy had seen before. Admiral Kevin Stone, now promoted to lead the human fleet, walked through the shipyard where the first new vessels were being built. The U.S. Morrison gleamed in the construction bay, its hull a perfect blend of ancient strength and modern power. "How does she look?" asked Captain Lisa Park, who would command the new ship. She was young for a captain, with black hair and confident. "Eyes, like she could fight the devil himself and win," Stone replied. "Your ancestors would be proud." The new ships carried more than just advanced technology. They carried the spirit of the ancient fleet, the refusal to surrender that had saved the galaxy 500 years ago. Human crews trained differently, now learning not just tactics, but the deeper lesson of their heritage. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. But the galaxy's reaction to humanity's new status wasn't entirely positive. On the world of Nexus Prime, Director Chun was holding another secret meeting. This time, the group was larger and more dangerous. "Human influence is growing too fast," she said to the assembled officials. "They have seats on the High Council. Now, command positions in the Coalition fleet, control of 3 entire sectors. In 6 months, they've gone from junior partners to equals. In another year, they might be running everything." General Corvus leaned forward. "My spies report the human shipyards are working at full capacity. They're building a fleet based on those ancient designs. A fleet that could challenge the entire coalition." "Then we stop them," said Senator Valk, "before they become too powerful to control." The plan they hatched was simple but dangerous. They would claim that humanity was building a secret weapon, that the ancient fleet contained technology that violated coalition treaties. They would demand inspections, restrictions, anything to limit human growth. But they underestimated how much the galaxy had changed. When the accusations were made public, the response was swift and decisive. "The humans saved us all," declared Ambassador Threx during an emergency council session. "They have earned the right to build whatever ships they choose." Captain Zara Vex, now promoted to Admiral, stood to address the council. "I've seen the human fleet, both ancient and modern. They're not building weapons of conquest. They're building shields for the galaxy." The conspiracy fell apart when other species refused to support it. The Alterian Republic, the Mantis Collective, even the normally cautious crystalline unity, sided with humanity. The galaxy remembered who had faced the darkness, and Director Chun and her allies were removed from office. Their careers ended by their own fear and prejudice. The galaxy had learned that humanity's strength came not from their weapons, but from their character. President Turner addressed the galaxy from the bridge of the U.S. Morrison, now the flagship of the human fleet. 500 years ago, our ancestors faced a choice, she said. They could run from the darkness, or they could stand and fight. They chose to fight, not for glory or conquest, but because it was right. She paused, looking out at the stars. Today, we face the same choice. The galaxy is vast and full of dangers we haven't discovered yet, but we're not afraid. We've learned from our ancestors that the greatest victories come not from superior technology, but from the refusal to surrender. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy as the human fleet launched for the first time. 50 new ships, each one carrying the names and spirit of the ancient heroes. The U.S. Morrison led the way, followed by the U.S. Blake, the U.E.S. Cooper, and dozens of others. Dr. Thorne watched from the Defiance, tears in her eyes. She had spent a year learning about the people who had built this ship, reading their logs, understanding their sacrifice. Now their legacy lived on in new ships and new crews. They would be proud, Martinez said, standing beside her. Yes, Dr. Thorne agreed. They would be. As the fleet disappeared into hyperspace, heading for the Kois, unknown regions beyond the galaxy's edge, the ancient ships sat in their place of honor. They were museum pieces now, but they were also something more important. They were proof that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the simplest source, the decision to do what's right, no matter the cost. The galaxy had laughed at the primitive human fleet, calling it crude and worthless. But they had learned too late that those rough metal ships carried something more valuable than advanced technology. They carried the human spirit, the refusal to give up, the willingness to sacrifice. Everything for others. And now, as new dangers emerged from the dark between the stars, the galaxy knew exactly who to call upon. The descendants of Morrison and Blake were out there, watching the frontiers, ready to face whatever came next. The ancient fleet had taught them all a lesson that would never be forgotten. Heroes aren't born from perfect conditions and advanced technology. They're forged in the fires of impossible choices. When ordinary people decide to do extraordinary things, the galaxy was safe, protected by the legacy of the fleet that everyone had laughed at, until they learned it was built by humans. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. What Dr. Thorne had discovered on the ancient human fleet changed everything. Within days, every major news network was covering the story. The Coalition Council called an emergency meeting. Ships from dozens of worlds headed toward the Kepler sector to see the fleet for themselves. President Lisa Turner of Earth sat in her office, watching the news reports with amazement. She was a calm woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but today, she looked stunned. Her aide, Colonel Kevin Stone, stood nearby with a tablet full of messages. Every government in the galaxy wants to talk to us, Stone said. The Alterian Republic, the Mantis Collective, even the Crystalline Unity. They're all sending representatives. Turner shook her head slowly. 500 years. Our people were out there fighting and dying, and we never knew. How is that possible? The colony ships were independent, Stone explained. They had no way to communicate with Earth across that distance. When they stopped sending reports, we assumed they were lost to accident or disease. We never imagined they were fighting a war. On the screen, Coalition News anchor Vrix Cullen was interviewing alien officials. His blue tentacles waved as he spoke. Ambassador Threx, how does your government respond to the revelation that humans single-handedly eliminated the Devourers? Ambassador Threx was a tall, insect-like creature from the Hive worlds. His voice was always calm and measured, but today he sounded shaken. The Hive worlds remember the Devourers. They were the nightmare that drove us to the far edges of the galaxy. We fled from them. We hid from them. We never fought them because we knew we would lose. And yet humans defeated them? Yes, Threx said simply, with ships made of metal and weapons that we would call primitive. They succeeded where we failed because they refused to give up. Similar interviews were happening across the galaxy. The Alterian Republic, known for their military, might admitted they had never faced an enemy as dangerous as the Devourers. The Mantis Collective, masters of engineering, studied the human ship designs with new respect, but not everyone was happy with the news. In a secret meeting on the world of Nexus Prime, several Coalition officials gathered to discuss the problem. "This changes the balance of power," said Director Chun of Coalition Intelligence. She was a small woman with sharp features and cold eyes. Humans went from being junior partners to being the heroes of the galaxy overnight. That's dangerous. General Corvus of the Alterian military agreed. Their primitive ships defeated the Devourers. Imagine what they could do with modern technology. We could be looking at a threat to Coalition stability. The other species are already talking about giving humans more authority, added Senator Vaughn from the Crystalline Unity. Special status, military leadership positions, even seats on the High Council. This has to be controlled. Back on Earth, President Turner was dealing with the same concerns from the opposite side. Human colonies across the galaxy were demanding answers, wanting to know why their government hadn't told them about the ancient fleet. "We didn't know," Turner said during a press conference. The colony ships were volunteers, sent out to explore and settle new worlds. We lost contact with them, but we never imagined they were fighting a war for the survival of all life in the galaxy. A reporter raised her hand. "Madam President, what does this mean for humanity's role in the Coalition?" Turner paused, choosing her words carefully. "It means we remember who we are. Our ancestors faced the darkness and didn't run. They stood their ground and fought, even when they knew they might not win. That's what humans do. We don't give up." Meanwhile, Dr. Thorne was still working on the ancient fleet, now with help from human experts sent from Earth. They were learning incredible things about the ships and the people who built them. "Look at this," said Dr. Martinez, who had been studying the ship's modifications. They turned cargo holds into weapon factories, medical bays into armor workshops. They rebuilt these ships with whatever they could find, and somehow made them work. Commander Ryan Walsh, a human military officer, was studying the battle tactics. Morrison and Blake were geniuses. They invented space combat techniques that we still use today. The pincer movement, the reactor bomb, the gravity slingshot, all of it started here. But the most important discovery came from the ship's personal logs. Dr. Thorne found recordings made by the crew during the war, messages they had hoped to send to Earth someday. "My name is Lieutenant Danny Cooper," one recording began. The voice was young, scared, but determined. "If anyone finds this, I want them to know we tried our best. We didn't run. We couldn't run. Someone had to stop the Devourers, and it was us." Another recording was from Captain Morrison himself, made just before his final battle. "I don't know if we'll win this war, but I know we'll fight it. That's what humans do. We face the impossible, and we don't back down." The recordings were played across the galaxy, and they changed how other species saw humanity. These weren't conquerors or warriors seeking glory. They were ordinary people who had been forced to become heroes. On the world of Altara, Captain Zara Vex was giving her own report to the Coalition Council. The human fleet was outnumbered 1,000 to 1. She said they had no chance of victory by any normal measure. But they won because they refused to accept defeat. The council chambers were quiet as she spoke. Representatives from dozens of worlds listened in amazement. "I'd studied the battle records," Zara continued. "The humans lost 90% of their ships, but they kept fighting. They turned their defeats into victories, their losses into weapons. They taught us that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the willingness to sacrifice everything for others." As the truth spread, monuments were planned across the galaxy. The ancient human fleet would be preserved as a memorial to courage and sacrifice. Schools would teach about Morrison and Blake, about the colonists who became warriors to save worlds they had never seen. But in the shadows, others were making different plans. The revelation of human capability had created fear as well as admiration. And fear, as always, led to dangerous decisions. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest test wasn't in the past. It was just beginning. Dr. Thorne worked for 3 days straight, trying to fix the damaged data from the ancient ship's computers. Her eyes were red from staring at screens, and her hands shook from too much coffee. But what she was finding was worth the exhaustion. "Captain," she said, calling Zara to her lab, "you need to see this." Zara arrived with Korak and several other officers. They gathered around Dr. Thorne's workstation, where she had managed to piece together fragments of the ship's logs. "I've been able to restore about 60% of the data," Dr. Thorne said. "And what I've found, it changes everything we know about this sector of space." She activated a holographic display that showed the fleet as it had been 500 years ago. The ships were bright and new, not the dark wrecks they were now. They moved in formation, their weapons ready. 500 years ago, humanity sent out colony ships to explore new worlds, Dr. Thorne began. Most of them went to safe sectors, places the Coalition had already mapped. But some went further, into unknown space. This fleet was one of them. The display changed, showing a star map. Red dots marked human colonies, scattered across several systems. "They found good worlds here," Dr. Thorne continued. "Planets with water, breathable air, rich soil. The colonies were growing, becoming successful. But then they found something else, something that had been hiding in the dark between the stars." The hologram shifted, showing strange, dark ships with twisted designs. They looked like they were made of shadow and hunger. "The Devourers," Dr. Thorne said quietly. "According to the logs, they were an ancient race that consumed everything they touched. Not just food or resources. They ate entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty space." Korak's mandibles clicked nervously. "I've never heard of any race called the Devourers." "Neither has anyone else," Dr. Thorne replied, "because they were wiped out by humans." The room went silent. The idea seemed impossible. Humans were barely trusted with basic Coalition duties, and here was proof that they had destroyed an entire alien race. "The logs tell the whole story," Dr. Thorne said, her voice getting stronger. "Captain Jake Morrison was in command of the colony ship New Hope. When the Devourers attacked, they destroyed 3 human colonies in a single week. Morrison realized that the Devourers were heading for Earth, and there was no way to warn anyone in time. The hologram showed the battle beginning. The primitive human ships faced creatures that moved like living darkness through space. Morrison made a decision that saved the galaxy," Dr. Thorne continued. "He converted the colony ships into warships. They couldn't run, so they chose to fight. 1,000 human colonists against an enemy that had been conquering worlds for millions of years." The display showed the first battles. The human ships were clumsy and slow compared to the Devourers, but they kept fighting even when they were losing. "The humans had no experience with space combat," Dr. Thorne said, "but they learned fast. They used tactics that no one had ever tried before. They turned their ships into weapons, ramming the Devourers when their guns failed. They used their fusion reactors as bombs, sacrificing themselves to take out enemy ships." Captain Zara watched in fascination as the hologram showed human ships exploding in brilliant flashes, taking Devourer vessels with them. "The war lasted 10 years, Dr. Thorne said. 10 years of desperate fighting. The humans never gave up, never retreated. They just kept fighting, even when their ships were falling apart around them." The display showed Admiral Susan Blake taking command after Morrison died in battle. Her ship, the Last Stand, became the flagship of the human fleet. Blake was a colony administrator before the war, Dr. Thorne explained. She had never fired a weapon in her life, but she learned to be a warrior because she had to be. The logs show her final message to Earth. We cannot win, but we will not lose. The Devourers will not pass. The hologram showed the final battle. The remaining human ships, battered and barely holding together, faced the last Devourer fleet. Near a dying star, Blake ordered her ships to push the Devourers into the star's gravity well, Dr. Thorne said. She used the star itself as a weapon, but the only way to make sure the Devourers couldn't escape was to go in with them. The display showed the last stand, leading the charge into the star's fire. The human ships died in nuclear flame, but they took the Devourers with them. The war ended that day, Dr. Thorne said quietly. The Devourers were extinct, but so were the human colonies. There were no survivors, no one to tell the story. The galaxy never knew what happened here. Korak was. Staring at the hologram with new respect, they saved us all. The Devourers could have spread across the galaxy, consuming everything. But the humans stopped them. With ships made of metal and hearts made of steel, Dr. Thorne said. They had no advanced technology, no energy shields, no quantum weapons. Just the will to fight and a refusal to surrender. Captain Zara looked at the data with amazement. The Coalition needs to know about this. The entire galaxy needs to know what humanity did here. Dr. Thorne nodded. I've found something else. The ship's logs contain detailed information about Devourer technology. Their weaknesses, their tactics. Morrison and Blake made sure to record everything, hoping that someday someone would find it and learn from their sacrifice. She activated another display, showing technical diagrams and battle plans. They left us a guide, she said. Instructions on how to fight the darkness if it ever returns. They knew they might not be the last humans to face the impossible. As the officers looked at the data, they began to understand the true scope of what they had found. This wasn't just an ancient fleet. It was a monument to human courage, a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest victories come from the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. We laughed at these ships, Korak said softly. We called them primitive, but they were built by heroes. Dr. Thorne looked at the hologram of the last stand, still burning in the star's fire. After 500 years, yes, she said, they were. The boarding party moved through the dark corridors of the ancient ship. Their lights cut through the darkness, showing walls made of simple metal and strange pipes running along the ceiling. The air was stale but breathable, kept fresh by systems that had somehow kept working for 500 years. This is incredible, Dr. Thorne whispered, running her hand along the wall. The metal is steel, basic iron and carbon. No one has used this for shipbuilding in centuries. Korak clicked, his mandibles in disgust. Primitive. Look at these welds. They're done by hand, not precision lasers. And these pipes. They're carrying actual water for cooling. How barbaric. Security Chief Grant moved ahead of the group, his weapon ready. He was a big man with dark skin and careful eyes. Stay close. Everyone. We don't know what kind of traps these people might have left. But as they went deeper into the ship, they began to see that the builders weren't as primitive as they first thought. The corridors had blast doors every few meters each, one thick enough to stop a bomb. The walls had slots for weapons, turning every hallway into a potential battleground. This ship was built for war, Grant said, examining one of the weapon slots. Real war, not the clean fights we have now. They expected to be boarded. Dr. Thorne found something even more interesting. Behind one of the panels, she discovered a maze of backup systems. Look at this, she called to the others. Every system has at least 3 backups. The lights, the air, the gravity. Everything can be fixed from multiple locations. Engineer Martinez whistled softly. She was short and stocky, with black hair and oil-stained fingers. That's actually brilliant. If one system fails, 2 others take over. If those fail, there's a manual backup. These people really knew how to build things that last. They reached what looked like the main engineering section. The room was huge, filled with massive machines that hummed quietly despite their age. The reactor at the center was unlike anything in the modern galaxy, a contained fusion reaction that burned clean and steady. How is this still running? Martinez asked, staring at the readouts. The design is so simple, but it's more efficient than our quantum cores. And look at these repair logs. She pointed to a screen covered in strange writing. They rebuilt this reactor 17 times during combat. 17 times. And it kept working. Korak had gone quiet. His earlier laughter was gone as he studied the engineering. This is ... This is not what I expected. These fusion reactors are crude. Yes, but they're also incredibly robust. Our quantum cores are more powerful, but if they break, the whole ship dies. These can be fixed with basic tools. Dr. Thorne was studying the writing on the screens. The letters looked familiar, but they were old and damaged. She took out her scanner and began recording everything she could find. They moved to what looked like the command center. The room was smaller than modern bridges, with simple chairs and metal consoles. But the design was smart. Every station could do multiple jobs, and the whole room could be sealed off if the ship was damaged. Captain, Beck's voice came through their communicators. We're scanning more of the fleet. Every ship is the same. Primitive on the outside, but incredibly tough on the inside. And we're finding something else. Battle damage. Lots of it. Grant nodded as he looked around the command center. This ship has been in many fights. Look at these repairs. He pointed to patches welded over holes in the walls. Energy weapons, projectile weapons, even what looks like ramming damage. But they kept fixing it and fighting. Dr. Thorne found the ship's main computer. It was a simple design, but it was still working. She connected her scanner and began trying to access the data files. The language was definitely familiar now, but it was old, changed by centuries of use. I'm getting something, she said, her voice tense with excitement. The ship's logs are still here. Most of them are damaged, but I can read pieces. This ship was called the Defiance, and the captain was someone named Jake Morrison. Martinez looked up from where she was studying the weapon systems. Morrison? That's a human name. Yes, Dr. Thorne said softly. It is. The team went quiet. They all knew what this meant, but none of them wanted to say it out loud. Humans had only been in space for about 200 years, and they were still considered newcomers by most of the galaxy. The Coalition barely trusted them with basic jobs. That's impossible, Korak said finally. Humans weren't even in this sector 500 years ago. Earth was still recovering from their wars. But Dr. Thorne was reading more of the logs, and her face was getting pale. The ship's registry shows it was built in 2387. That's right, when the first human colony ships left Earth. And there are more entries here. Battle reports, crew lists, supply requests. All human names. She looked up at the team, her eyes wide with shock. This isn't just a human ship. This whole fleet is human. And according to these logs, they were fighting something called this Devourers. The name sent a chill through the group. None of them had heard of the Devourers, but something about the name felt dangerous, like a word that should not be spoken. We need to get this data back to the captain, Grant said. If this fleet is human, if they were out here 500 years ago, fighting some kind of war, dot dot. Then everything we know about human history is wrong, Dr. Thorne finished. She was, still staring at the screen, trying to process what she was seeing. These weren't explorers or colonists. These were warriors. And they were fighting something terrible. As they prepared to return to the Starwind, none of them noticed the small symbol etched into the wall near the computer. It was simple, just a circle with stars inside, but it was the same symbol that flew on every human ship in the modern galaxy. The flag of Earth. Captain Zara Vex stood on the bridge of the GSV Starwind, her blue skin reflecting the soft glow of the control panels. The ship was the pride of the Galactic Coalition, equipped with the most advanced technology from dozens of different worlds. Its energy shields could stop a small moon, and its quantum engines could cross half the galaxy in a few days. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Beck from the sensor station. He was young for a human, barely 30, with short brown hair and nervous eyes. Most humans were still new to space travel, and the Coalition barely trusted them with basic duties. "What kind of strange?" Zara asked, walking over to look at his screen. "It's a fleet, Captain. A big one, but the readings are weird." Zara looked at the display. Dozens of ships floated in the darkness of space, but they weren't moving. They just drifted like dead things between the stars. The sensors showed they were made of metal, not the living crystal or energy fields that modern ships used. "How old are they?" she asked. "About 500 years, maybe more," Beck replied. "They're in the Kepler sector, right where the old maps say nothing should be." Dr. Liana Thorne looked up from her science station. She was one of the few humans who had earned real respect in the Coalition. Her red hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes were sharp with intelligence. 500 years? That's before most species joined the Coalition. Chief Engineer Korik clicked his mandibles together, making the sound his people used for laughter. He was tall and thin, with 4 arms and the dark shell of the Mantis Collective. Probably some dead race that couldn't even build proper ships. Metal hulls? Chemical rockets? How primitive. "Set course for the fleet," Zara ordered. "Let's see what we've found." The Starwind moved through space like a silver arrow. As they got closer, the ancient ships became clearer on the screens. They were huge, bigger than most modern warships, but they looked rough and simple. The metal was dark and scarred, with strange marks burned into the hulls. "Look at those designs," Korak said, all 4 arms moving as he gestured at the screen. "Whoever built these had no idea what they were doing. Those are chemical thrusters, not quantum drives. And those weapon ports, they're so crude." Beck ran more scans. "Captain, I'm reading some kind of writing on the hulls. The computer can't translate it." Dr. Thorne moved closer to the screen. Something about the ships felt familiar, but she couldn't say why. The writing was strange, made of simple lines and curves. It looked almost like, no, that was impossible. "Any life signs?" Zara asked. "None," Beck replied. "These ships have been dead for centuries." "But Captain, there are. A lot of them. I count 47 vessels, all different sizes. Some are huge, like city-sized. Others are smaller, maybe fighters or scouts. The biggest ship sat in the center of the fleet, like a sleeping giant. Its hull was covered in patches and repairs, as if it had been in many battles. Strange symbols were painted on its side, faded but still visible after all these years. "That's their flagship," Dr. Thorne said quietly. "Look at how the other ships are arranged around it." This was a war fleet. "A war fleet?" Korak laughed. "Again, who would they fight with ships like these? Any modern vessel could destroy them all without breaking a sweat." But as they got closer, Dr. Thorne noticed something else. The ships weren't just old. They were different. Each one had been changed, modified, rebuilt. Extra weapons had been added in strange places. Armor plates were welded over weak spots. These weren't the clean, perfect lines of modern ships. These were built by people who had to fight and survive. "Captain," Beck said, his voice excited, "I'm picking up some kind of signal from the flagship. It's very weak, but there's still power somewhere inside." "Impossible," Korak said. "After 500 years? No power source lasts that long." "These did," Dr. Thorne said softly. She was staring at the largest ship, and something deep in her, memory, was stirring. "Captain, I request permission to lead the boarding party." Sarah nodded. "Take a full team. Security, engineering, medical. If there's still power, there might be dangers we don't know about." As the Starwind moved next to the ancient flagship, Dr. Thorne felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. These ships were a mystery, a puzzle from the past. But why did they feel so familiar? Why did looking at them make her heart beat faster? The docking bay doors opened, and the boarding party prepared to enter the dead ship. None of them knew. They were about to discover something that would change how the galaxy saw humanity forever. They thought they were just exploring an old wreck, the remains of some forgotten race that had died out long ago. They had no idea they were about to meet their heroes.